Dave Talks Comics, Episode 32. Dave Talks Comics is a podcast on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comics I have read and cartoons I have watched. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com. On Twitter, at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to dave@davetalkscomics.com. On this episode of Dave Talks Comics, the final installment of my Heroes Con coverage is the Comics Journalism Roundtable from Sunday, the third day of Heroes Con. The panel is hosted by Tom Heinches of Hogan's Alley and features Tom Spurgeon of Comics Reporter, Heidi McDonald of The Beat, and Chris Sims of Comics Alliance.
Now that Tom has finally decided to grace us with his presence, we can get started. My name is Tom Heinches. I publish at Hogan's Alley magazine. And I'm honored to be moderating this panel today on comics journalism with Tom Spurgeon, Chris Sims, and the peerless Heidi McDonald. So I just wanted to open it up by getting you to briefly describe what it is you do, and we'll get into how you got here later.
My name is Tom Spurgeon. I run a site called The Comics Reporter. I don't do a lot of writing outside the site, so that's pretty much all I do.
My name is Chris Sims, and I make fun of the X-Men on a professional basis. I am the senior writer for comicsalliance.com. I also used to have my own site where I used to write a lot, and people yell at me because now I write for a site that pays me money to do exactly the same thing.
The dream. My name is Heidi McDonald. I write for my own site, comicsgeek.com. I also work for Publishers Weekly, where I edit graphic novel reviews for them, and newsletter, and do a podcast, and write the occasional article, edit articles, do that, all that thing that editor people do. And occasionally, very rarely, I write for one or two other places. But like Tom, I don't have time for that. And I also appear on panels with Tom Spurgeon. So I said we were going to start having puppet shows. That's my dream, because we were on a tour now.
Well, Heidi, let me start with you. What path took you to where you are now? How did you get here? What led you to that opportunity?
Well, I think from a personality standpoint, I guess it was a snoofiness, curiosity, personal curiosity about things. Where maybe I write journalism as opposed to, quasi, I really put quotes around that, but, nonfiction, current events-based writing, as opposed to fiction. I think it was a sense of Snoopy. I wanted to know Lois Lane, and as a writer, when I was a kid, we had typewriters, and I was totally into the typewriter, and I always wanted to write. And actually, I've told my origin story many times, but my first professional work was the Comics Journal back in many, many, many years ago. That's true. Tom and I have known each other for, I think I visited you in California.
Yeah.
That's oh God, wow. Well, we should talk after this, because I went and visited Fantagraphics in Seattle, and it was mind blown. But yeah, I wrote for the Comics Journal, and I just sent in some stuff, and they published it, and that was it. I was hooked. I was hooked on the feeling.
Chris, how did you get to the position you hold?
It's a harrowing story.
We're on the edge of our seats.
I wanted to be a writer since I was 12 years old. When my dad gave me a book of Dave Barry columns. He was my idol as a child. I wrote a little bit when I was a teenager because there was a thing called the .com bubble, which is where people would pay you with money to do things online. And this money turned out to be almost completely imaginary. So instead of, I was getting $150 a column at 17, which was amazing. That's like good money now.
Yeah, I was going to say, right? 90s are alive.
I was expecting a check for $450, and instead I got a notice of termination of freelance agreement. And I stopped writing because that was very disheartening. When I was 22, I made a New Year's resolution to write more because I just dropped out of college because I hated it. Because college does not let you talk for 20 minutes about how Hawkman sucks and pass. So a friend of mine named Phil encouraged me to start a blog, which I thought was very self-indulgent and arrogant, so of course I did it. And I was working in a comic book store, and I was reading comics, and it was all I did. I worked around comics all day, and I took comics at home at night and read them. So I started writing about comic books. Jay Pinkerton was in about 2007, was the first editor who decided to hire me for paid work. I wrote for the relaunched Crack magazine, which was also based on imaginary money. And it folded after 3 issues when I had banked 5 issues worth of content. Later on the website, which is thriving. Laura Hudson hired me to write for Comics Alliance when she got the job running Comics Alliance. And originally my job was to just once a week do like a listicle. And then that turned into 3 times a week. And then I was like, Laura, if you could pay me twice what you're paying me now for this, I would be making more money from this than I am from my terrible job working in a comic book store where I have to deal with people all day. And so she's like, that's it? That's all it would take for you to quit your job? And I said, yes. And so she hired me, and I became the senior writer of Comics Alliance. And I got the job writing a long feature every day, and then it was first a shorter post every day, like a little newsy item or something. Now I have a job where I do a feature every day, plus 2 short posts every day, plus I do a video series every week, plus I do some weekend art stuff. That's what I do. I'm mostly, everything, it's all opinion stuff. So it's all either reviews or punditry, I guess is a good name for it. Or stating the simple fact that Bob Kane was the worst person ever lived. He's a monster.
Never run out of material that way. And I didn't mean to save the best for last, but Tom, how did you get to
How dare you?
You screwed that up, if that was your intent. I went to seminary after college, and I have a master's in theological studies. And of course, that's even more useless than a cartooning degree that they have these days. I didn't know what to do. I worked for home shopping as a result afterwards because my life was going that well. And I would leave work to sneak over and read comics at the comic shop because I decided that was a place that was open that would let me stand around and loiter while I was on the clock back at the factory. And I saw they had an ad in the Comics Journal that Seattle sounded a lot better, the summer of OJ. Seattle sounded a lot better than Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I was, and it sounded still cool. And I went out there after I was the 6th choice. Finally, an idiot was idiot enough to accept the job to go out and work for Gary and Kim in Seattle, and drove cross country and quit by fax on the Monday that I was supposed to be back at work for my vacation. And went to work for Fantagraphics for 5 years and ran the Comics Journal during the lean distributor war times. I was actually at one point the only employee at the magazine when we usually had 2 or 3 and would write all the news too. It's kind of a bummer. Hung out in Seattle for a few years. I got a friend of mine and I scored a syndicated comic strip, which was a part of the spur I could quit when I turned 30. And we did a strip for King Features for a few years. he quit. We were actually doing pretty well. He quit, and I had a Stan Lee book to do with a friend of mine, and he thought I was just so pitiful at that point. He was like, "You know what blogs are? Do you know who Jim Romanesco is?" I remember that's how he phrased it. And he thought it would be cool if like I jump on for 10 minutes a day and just list like 5 stories that were cool in comics. Like this is 2003, 2004, so he thought that would be a really useful way to spend my time, and we could maybe like sell it at some point. Like they sold like roller coaster blogs and stuff. Like there's all these blogs being sold at the time. So I just continued to blog. I kind of took to it, and we launched the day Christopher Reeve died. So I guess it's 10 years this fall. That was my top news story the day we did it, and I've just written about comics that way ever since.
Well,
So
Well,
directly.
Tom Heinges, what is your, because you do Holden Valley for 20 years, what is your origin in comics?
who's moderating this?
Yes.
morning?
No, but I would like to. All right, but you know.
No, well, actually, 3 of the 4 people up here have some affiliation with the Comics Journal. And I worked for the Journal for a few years in the mid-'80s and left. And I don't know if any of you remember Nemo magazine. It was a magazine devoted primarily to vintage cartoon. Anyway, Rick Marshall was the founder of Nemo, and Nemo got canceled, and Rick and I stayed in touch, and we would always, when we talked blue sky about what we'd like to see in a comics magazine that we weren't getting now, yada, 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 we thought, well, nobody else is giving it to us, we'll do it ourselves. And this is actually our 20th year. Can't believe it, but yeah, we're still plugging away with Hogan's Alley. So thank you for asking me. So, outside of the journal, though, which we've been mentioning a lot already, there's not a great tradition of comics journalism to draw from and be inspired by. So what shaped your various approaches to covering the industry? How do you determine what matters, what you're going to cover, what you're going to investigate? What shapes your approach? Jump in.
Well, it's very idiosyncratic, I guess. I mean, when I launched The Beat, which also was about 10 years ago, I can't remember, it's either this month or next month is the 10th anniversary, so I should have a cake, but I had been working previous to that for The Pulse, which was a site run by Rick Veitch, an awesome comics creator who had this site that was kind of, back in those days, there was only CBR, Newsarama, and The Pulse was like this third tab. And there was Comics Bulletin, Silver Bullet Comics, there was one other site. It's really only 4 news sites about comics at all. And Rick had kind of his role model was a little bit more kind of tabloidy news, but business news. Like he really liked to talk about, gossip flowed so much more freely then. And
when you say tabloid, you mean sensationalism?
Well, but he liked to put it in a. He reported business news. Like if something went on at DC where there, somebody got fired, or there was like, Warner Brothers reported their stock option. There had a stock reporter Disney. He liked to report the business news, but he liked to do it in a way that was a little bit not dry. He liked to dramatize it a little bit because he's a storyteller. He is a really excellent storyteller, and that definitely appealed to me as well. I like sometimes write a business story for Publishers Weekly where they don't like to dramatize it, so to me it was more like, again, why? My number one question is always, what is the real reason this happened? And, most of the time you can't answer that question. So you can only approach halfway, the Zeno's journalism. I wanted to cover it in, I'm trying to think of who my role model was at that time. There was no deadline then. Now that's a really quick way to say I was more like deadline. But it was keeping on with what Rick was doing and what the Comics Journal had done, and covering the comics industry in in a business way and a creative way that was more entertaining, more inherently entertaining. And I did humor pieces. I mean, back like Chris was saying, there wasn't that many sites. There wasn't, so it was all like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. A woman who writes about comics is also blogging about Gerard Butler. My God, it's never been done. And people would like. It's crazy how everything I did would be like, at the airport, for San Diego, it'd be like, hi, did you hear about Gerard Butler? And, I went to Spain, and people were like, I do this site. And they're like, oh, CC, Gerard Butler. And so, these little in-jokes that I had in the site, went over great. And, but then everybody else did too. And I don't know, I was rambling horrible there. Sorry about that. But, it's just what I like. The short answer is what I like or what I think people need to know. What is some information that is not well known, which is really hard to find now because there's, tweeting about it. So it went from like revealing the top 10 licensed products, which I would have access to in some business forum. Now everybody has that chart, to maybe interpreting it through my lens. So,
Yeah,
I don't know.
You've touched on a couple of things I'm going to come back to, but I also want to give Tom and Chris a chance to weigh in.
Yeah.
What steers the direction you're going for coverage, or what determines what gets your attention?
I like to tell people why they're wrong. Tom?
Yeah. I don't know. My dad was a newspaperman, so I worked, shitty jobs. I was a really shitty newspaper kid, that would come and leave go out and drink beers in the car and come back in and try to spell Andre Galarraga. I remember not being able to one night. So I had crappy newspaper jobs when I was a kid, and so I kind of understand that milieu. But the big thing for me is I write whatever for the site. I just kind of write whatever I want, what seems to me to be news, and I am lucky that I have the freedom to not have to cover anything I want. I'm very strictly comics focused, which I think not all of the sites are. That I don't do a lot of the adaptations or the other expressions of these characters in other media. I can kind of concentrate on comics, and there's no pressure for me to. I'm small enough that there's no pressure on me to, give anything more coverage over another. I also like telling people when they're wrong.
Well, great to it.
Isn't that awesome?
Well,
yeah.
Well, Heidi, you mentioned Twitter and social media and the ever-increasing pace of coverage and information you get now. How do you compete with that? How do you balance getting it right with getting that there? Not first necessarily, but as soon as reasonably possible to ensure accuracy and all those good journalistic
What is accuracy?
considerations.
Jesus Christ. What do you think I am, Tom? How do you compete? You don't. You join them. It is. I use Twitter a lot. And I think it really does. I evolve constantly, in what I put on the site, and I think right now I'm kind of trying to figure that out myself. Of how what purpose it should have in the industry and with how people get their information, because TLDR. I couldn't possibly. My attention span is so short. Both Chris writes these long, well organized, well thought out pieces, and I'm like, he does one of those a day. What the hell? Is it Adderall? I don't know. And I could not possibly do that. It takes so much effort for me to do that. Maybe just because of how my brain works. Tom does these little mini essays every day.
Well, you don't share Chris's passion for telling people they're wrong.
Very few do.
Yeah, I don't. I'm more informational, I guess. So I don't know. I'm figuring that out right now. I think what people like reading most, I think what I provide most is still probably some kind of business-oriented stuff with a humorous or entertaining slant. Like I do sales charts and all that. So, it's kind of like what. I used to be very self-indulgent. on the site, and now I can't do that at all, and so I try to be more, I'm trying to figure out what people need to know.
Why can't you be self-indulgent?
Because there's no time. Because people don't like it, People go because when
Wait, there's no time. I mean, in the definition of self-indulgence,
well,
anyway, I've been kidding.
Well, no, but I mean, honestly, if people, like even when I started my site, I would do funny articles because that's what I actually really like doing, and people would, they didn't retweet them then, but now they go to BuzzFeed for that. So, and I'm not going to compete with BuzzFeed, so.
I feel like everything I do is self-indulgent. And that's not a joke, because there's...
You're right.
I am. Because who else is going to write 2,000 words about the Power Rangers series I'm watching that week? In theory, there are the facts, right? That's what journalism is about. There are the events that transpired, and in theory, facts are everywhere. Like, an event happens, and if you have a phone in your pocket, you know that happened. If you get previews, you know the books that are coming up. If you go to a comic store, you know what's coming out and what's selling. So the only thing you can offer, for me, the only thing I can offer is a perspective on what happened. Whether that perspective is, Andy Corey, who's the current editor of Comics Alliance, pointed out something that we posted not too long ago. And he was like, "This is the example post of what I want our news stuff to be." And it is here are the facts. This is why this is important. And this is why this is important is a completely subjective thing that is based not only on the editorial direction of the site, but it's based on me. Why do I think this is important is completely different from not just Tom or Heidi, but it's different from Andy Corey and Andrew Wheeler and Cheryl Lynn and anybody else who writes for the site. I do it more often than anyone else on that site. So I have to make it interesting for myself, or else I would just walk off my balcony because. That's all I have. I have this perspective that I have developed and refined and built in jokes around. I've never taken a picture for Comics Alliance that did not have a copy of 50 Cent Blood on the Sand somewhere in it because that makes me laugh. So that's journalism is a very speculative word for what I do, which is a cop out, I know, but that's all you have to offer is a perspective on the events and trying to put them into perspective.
Tom, how do you compete with the speed of information?
I have a story about the speed. I was at San Diego 5 years ago and riding down one of those giant escalators, and there's people on either side of me, and I see the piers. It might have been a group of Heidi's people, but it's one of those large group of people that kind of descend on, probably Jonas. They're descend on the show, and I could recognize some of my peers down there, and they're all having a conference, and then all of a sudden they break and they all take off to different areas, and I'm oh my god, what are they covering? And I'm on this escalator and I'm shaking, and then all of a sudden I realize well, what are they covering? That's ridiculous. It's if it's an emergency, it's a comics emergency. I got to the bottom, and instead of going and finding out, I just went across the street and went to the hotel bar and I went in there, and I realized I would never be the guy to break anything. And like Chris said, it's right. I have the luxury. I've been around long enough that at least the 15, 16 people that read the site are going there for my opinion, and they'll wait a couple of days for that. So I just don't. I'm a lone operator. I don't have anyone. I have a guy who writes a European column every now and then, and I'll pay someone to cover a show I can't go to, but I don't have a staff. I don't have people. So sometimes they have to wait until I get to it, and I'm lucky enough that people will wait a little bit.
Yeah, and when I was still paying attention to the comments and stuff, we would get, because I did, we would get people who were talking about Comics Alliance, they'll be covering this story mid-week or whatever. And it's if you want to read the press release, you can. That's fine. But we also get the press releases. We have to figure out which ones we care about That's the trick. That's the prestige.
Well, also, like, the social media is great for making fun stuff until you can get to it later on.
Yeah.
It's like a placeholder.
So, by the way, I'm not out of touch completely. I heard about that thing, okay? So.
Initial thoughts, you suck. More later.
No, that's you basically described me getting my review comps. Oh, this is embargo? Well, okay. I'll cycle this next week, but guys.
Well, when I started working on the journal in the mid-'80s, it was to get in touch with people in the comics industry for actual journalistic purposes was kind of, people weren't sure how to deal with that. It was a little, the comic journal was always kind of a read part, tended to annoy people anyway. In the time you've been working in the industry, do you find people are more comfortable with the idea of the industry being covered as from a business perspective, or from a straight news perspective? How has that changed over time, from your point of view?
People are more sophisticated and are more willing to sacrifice the coverage to control the message. It's a big thing. Like I won't talk to you.
Describe an example of that.
An example of that. That's a good question. I guess maybe not a specific example, but just you call up to get a quote about something and people won't go on the record. I did a TCAF report where there was complaints about the programming a year ago, and I think it's interesting. I think conventions are really interesting, and I wanted to talk about that. And literally, no one would go on the record, and it just seemed like the dumbest thing in the world. Like there would be like a reprisal for saying they screwed up the program or something. But people are so not willing to get along, and and big companies sometimes will refuse to even comment on something. DC will refuse to comment on stuff a lot of the time because they would just rather release that themselves. Like they'll send like a statement that they put out on their site rather than give me something specific. And people are more sophisticated generally and cynical in terms of kind of controlling their message.
You guys see that as well, or how is?
Yeah. Oh well. I mean, yeah, 1,000,000,000%. And I mean, it's frustrating because, before I did journalism, I started out writing for the journal, and then I went into editing comics. I worked for Disney and I worked for DC, and then I went back to my first love. And I have a lot of friends in the industry. I mean, people I gave jobs to and hired and discovered and blah blah. And as an editor, and then when I became a journalist, everything changed, and it was very personally. People who I considered friends would lie to my face, and literally lie to my face, and which I can understand. You can't tell me something, but telling me a lie about it—that's now you're really fucking with me.
Well, you make a great point because in my experience, you have to be willing to lose friendships.
Yes.
To do your job right.
Yes.
And do you guys ever encounter that friction?
Do you have friends?
I got a lot of friends. I'm universally beloved. No,
They might be lying.
They might be. I didn't know Heidi considered us friends. That's what I was trying to say. Comics are weird. It's a weird thing. They're a weird medium. They're a weird industry. These, the remoras on the shark of comics are weird. That I make a living writing about comics. That I make a living because people know that I know a lot about Batman because I've read a lot of Batman comics, but I don't write Batman comics. That's weird.
Yeah, that is unique.
Yeah, is there another industry where everyone involved gets together in the same room and hangs out 12 times a year? Do movies do that? I don't think so. But yeah, it's weird. I've gotten a lot of friendships out of comics, but I'm coming at it from I started in this thing that I completely controlled, and I just wanted to write about the stuff that I wanted to write about. So I would write about why the stuff that I didn't like was terrible, and I would write about why the stuff that I liked was great. Surprisingly, that latter thing got me more friends. Although I will say, I have met people In comics, which I'm very surprised about, I'll name drop. Tim Seeley is a guy where I was like really harsh on his comics the first time I read them. And then I met him at a con. It was super awkward. But he was like, no, it's not a big deal. Maybe give it another shot. And like he gave me a copy of Backslash and I read it and I ended up really liking it because all I read was that weird Suicide Girls crossover issue, which is yeah, like, but it's, you know, what I mean, I try even when I'm going hard at somebody, like I try not to make it personal, which I think is key. And I think that's just, you know, that's a rule in reviewing anything, is that it has, you know, you try to make it about the art and not the person, unless it being about the person is the story. Like, I never read Zeros. I ain't got time in my life. You know?
Well, Tom, does an adversarial role enter into what you do?
Sure. I mean,
that's kind of a leading question for Tom.
I guess, you know, I mean, I think I actually have the opposite experience. I think people are much more cognizant of their brand and much more incredulous that you're not helping them promote stuff now, you know, just kind of like, I don't understand why you haven't written a story about my comic that I'm kickstarting, and are very angry about that, or that you're in a very much a kind of a us against them mentality. I get a little more than I got 20 years ago, that there's not that, you know, expectation that that's your job, that's what you do. It's kind of like you're against me or for me.
Well,
this is a simple fact that people thank me for a positive review, or like, that's my job. You can thank me that I picked up your comic instead of another comic, but I don't hold any, you know, I'm not like I'm against you if I, you know, don't like your comic or something.
I've gotten that a
want
lot.
to succeed. It's a weird construct, a weird mindset.
I've gotten that a lot, and I understand it because it's always nice. Like, as you know, I got books out, which is another weird thing about comics.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's always nice when someone favorably reviews your work. But I've had people like come up and thank me, and it's like, look, if there's a ratio of who did the most work in this equation, your slice of the pie is a lot bigger than mine. I like scanned a JPEG and said, "This is great," and you actually made it. So, but I get it. But it's like it's a weird thing. So like, you have to tell people.
Do you guys find that? I'm sorry, Tom. I'm curious to find about this because I found that there is so much coming out. You know, Tom, you mentioned Kickstarter. It's like if I could, I can. It's Google Mail, Gmail. So I could just create a filter that takes out all the emails that have Kickstarter, and my inbox would be reduced by half. And you know, because I mean, I'm nice, and I like, you know, I mean, how many Kickstarter emails do you get a day? I mean, I must get like, you know.
You know, in general, the one thing I'm struggling with, and I'm thinking about. I've thought a lot this year about closing the site, doing something else, and one of the reasons for that is the industry's too big.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
It's really hard for me to cover. And it probably always was, but I think what we have, it's just I'm dumb enough that it just now occurred to me. But every so often, like a focused blogger will come along, like a Gary Tyrell or Zainab, is that how you say her name, in Britain. And it's not so much that it's like different coverage. It's literally like, I'll go like 10 articles in a row on Zainab where I just don't recognize any of the British small press people she's talking about. So these people have completely escaped my attention, and I'm just not able to cover that. And it's the same with Kickstarter. It's just so big now. There's always something going on. I run at the end of the year, I run a holiday interview series where I'll interview like 21 people, 21 days in a row. And it's always a good traffic. I haven't looked at my traffic forever. I'm told it's a good traffic thing. And I really like doing it, and people seem to like it and respond to it. The reason I did it is because there was 21 days in a row when I started 10 years ago where literally like nothing would happen. Like you have nothing going on. And like the 21 days around Christmas, their shit broke. Someone actually put out like a pretty big thing, I forget what it was, on Christmas Eve. Like, what the hell? Like, we don't take any time off now. It's literally like this is the flood of material. But it's such a big industry now. And I either kind of resign, you have to find a different model, or you focus, or you resign yourself to doing a crappy, that's my strategy. Resign yourself to doing a crappy job with, I used to like, if I added a column, like if I added a focus column, that would take care of things. And I do this like webcomics Friday focus. It is the worst column in the world. I literally have it's basically like this, it's like the shame column every week, where I just go there and just make like, here's how I am ignorant about webcomics, today's edition. And I'll try to list stories and try to do link blogging to it, and I just don't. So I'm falling way behind and not catching up.
But what I find is that because, now there are a bajillion sites, but there's still only, a handful that are Google ranked, And, now there's CBR, and there's Bleeding Cool, and, Newsarama, too, and IGN. I could name, like the Beats traffic is never, Comics Alliance, obviously, and the Beats traffic has never risen above a certain level, but it's always remained steady. But if I look, if I Google Comics News, I'm still one of the 10 sites that come, the first 10 sites. So, you know what? This is a real, Tom, said, maybe thinking of shutting down the site. I've been toying with the same thoughts, and because we've been doing it for 10 years every day, and I guess
I will rule.
Yeah, so Chris is young, and
that's
strong. He's young and strong, and full of vim, But what I'm getting
it's
at.
pronounced wine.
Yeah. But what I find is that publishers who aren't making their daily deal with IGN and CBR and Bleeding Cool, you can only run each one of those sites can only run so many exclusives every day, or so many breaking news stories, and then there's the stories that are on BuzzFeed and the ones that are in Daily News, and this. So they can only get USA Today. That's the one everybody wants to be in. So the publishers would only run. There's a finite number of slots for the news thing. So they, even though my site, traffic-wise, is still very small, they still are like, why you didn't cover it? Why? Or you didn't run can't you please, 10 emails in a day? And it's like, Tom, you said, why can't I be self-indulgent? It's like, oh my God, now I feel so horrible. And, someone at TCAF was like you don't, you got to get this girl. She's got to get it. But TCAF was like, Heidi, I noticed you weren't running our stories, and it's like one of my favorite publishers. And I'm like, I'm not, and I'm like, holy, it's the last few months of, your personal thing, whatever. You sometimes life is like, you know what, I got to take care of this. I just can't. I got to take some time to do this. And I was like, oh my God, now they don't. What do I do? I must clone myself or kill myself.
Let me touch on a couple of things, and I want to take some questions. But journalism requires resources, which is a highfalutin way of saying we need to eat. How do you monetize comic journalism? I hate to sully the conversation by bringing in money, but we have to do something.
What's your business model? That's my other favorite.
We blogged. I answer that pretty seriously. I don't think people answer that question seriously. We blogged just for free for a year, just didn't put stuff up, and then we just did display advertising. The site probably brings in, for me, I take 80%. I have a partner who does all the back end stuff. And I take 80% of it, and we make, I'm making the mid-20s off the site. It's about half my time. I spend 18 hours a week on the site pretty rigorously, chop it dead. And it's not the strong half of my income, but that's okay. I can do that forever. What we're finding now is that people are pulling out. I think for the reason we talked about earlier is that display advertising is ridiculous. I'm not driving traffic to the site. All it is now is it's patronage advertising, which is people are like, we want him around, or we want him to be there to give us the kind of story that we want. So they like me or like the product, so they'll give me some advertising. So I have to figure that out because a lot of people are leaving. I don't even know, if people even go to sites anymore. I had a guy at TCAF tell me, he's like, you're Tom Spurgeon, I read your Twitter. Your Twitter's really funny. And I was like, thanks. Sometimes I worry that people just read the Twitter and don't go to the site. He's like, oh, you got a site? And I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. I'm going to sneak in because you screwed me on that panel earlier today. Your guys' traffic was really good. And it's not so much, and not to say that it's not, like a meritocracy that it's just you guys are awesome that you guys get. But is there an element to your traffic that is how you're hosted or how you're, do you know that, that back end stuff? Is there a way, do you guys maximize your words and headlines and do all that stuff too? Are you guys good about that? Because your guys' traffic is super admirable.
Laura would always rewrite my headlines, which is fine, I don't care. And Caleb did a little bit, but like I don't know any of the back end stuff. I just write them. I do know that when we were owned by AOL, whenever we would do like anything that had like any kind of mainstream appeal, it was always a big goal for us to get on the AOL front page, because then we would get like hundreds of thousands of hits. And if you wanted to know who was still going to the AOL front page in 2012, it was old racists. And it was it was a constant like nightmare where like, because it used to be like when I started at Comics Alliance, you would get an email for every comment and you couldn't turn it off.
Oh my God.
So we finally figured that out before I reviewed Transformers 3. Thank God. But like Laura would always be trying to push stuff to like we gotta do something like on the AOL main page. And I was like, please don't, please, whatever you do. But no, like I don't know. I know that. I mean, like Caleb did yell at me once about the tags, because we have we do the tags, and when I do Funky Watch, which is my monthly column, tightly laser focused on the newspaper comic strip Funky Winterbean and its sister strip Crankshaft, I always use the tags as extra joke space.
Right.
I do that for X-Men too. If you go and search on Comics Lines for Cyclops is the worst, a series of articles will come up that have been tagged with that phrase. Caleb yelled at me once, but he also said he didn't really care. he was like, yeah, you're kind of screwing up our tags. And he was like, but I don't care, it's funny. So that's like, I do know editorial and know like business stuff. And that is like why I've never pursued like an editorial position at Comics Alliance, because like that is the last thing I want to do.
Right.
I want to like I need to write the 2,000 words that I am interested in and then go to sleep.
Yeah.
I didn't want to handle anything else.
No, but on the other hand, I like to tweak WordPress themes for relaxation. So, I mean, that's literally when I like to relax. I go into my back end and just start fiddling around and, fixing things and, twiddling with my plugins and all that. I mean, I don't know how to code, but I love playing with all that. I'm a control freak, and I had so many people who fucked up the tech of my first two sites that I was like, never again. I will always be able to fix this myself. And so I love doing that. But you asked about monetization. And I like Tom. I am display advertising focused, and I still get people want to take out ads, because again my rankings, and but every day I get offers from these horrible ad networks, to join up, and so then that must mean my content has some value on the internet. But I had Google. I use a good ad network called I don't remember, and actually it was
Project Wonderful?
No, I said a good ad number. I
I follow the story.
It was federated, and now it went on and became its own thing. They have a new name, which is why I can't remember it. But it's an ad network that works with a lot of pop culture sites, and it was good. It brought in a certain amount of money, and not enough to live on, but a little bit, and but I still had Google, and then Google decided that I lost my Google AdSense because of adult content, and Google would send me these emails saying, we're sorry, your AdSense has been suspended because of this image, and it would be like an ad. Literally, it was a movie poster for the girl with the dragon tattoo, that she was topless, and they would put things over her, but you can't have veiled nudity on AdSense. And then I opened up. Do people, and does anybody know this? Like, does anybody know about all this AdSense stuff? So I sure didn't. And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole on that, and because my site is so old and I have like 16,000 posts, you're supposed to go in and clean it all up, and I'm going to do that. And then somebody went and, then I got called again, and now it's canceled, so I have to go appeal it. So I'm fighting Google right now about this. It's not a lot of money, but it's money. And some people have told me that possibly someone ratted me out, like that Google doesn't go looking for this, so it's even possible that somebody was trying to get me in trouble with Google. And so
You crossed the wrong person.
I crossed the wrong person, which is pretty fascinating to me. And like I said, I have this other, I have other very loyal advertisers. So it wasn't that huge, but at the same time, it sort of got me riled up about this whole thing because, AdSense is the micro payments of which McLeod spoke up on Mount Ararat. And, you could make six figures. When blogging started, you could make six figures easily from AdSense, blogging about, baby products or celebrities or that kind of thing. And, now you can't.
I bought a car with Amazon affiliates money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is true.
Which on the old side?
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there you go. I mean, you can game the system or buy a car. But actually, you know what? I'm going to make a little announcement here because I am going to try a Patreon campaign, and which is a different kind of crowdfunding other than Kickstarter, where it's a subscription model. And I might make $1, I might make $5. So I don't know, but I feel like Patreon has been set up. The guy who started it is a musician, and he kind of wants to go around the AdSense model, which is the lifeblood of the lower internet, basically. So, and I know a lot of web cartoonists are using it, and nobody's made Order of the Stick money off of it. So it doesn't quite have that cachet of Kickstarter, but we'll see. Because like I said, it's all very much in motion. And I kidded about Tom and I being on so many panels, but Tom and I have been on many of these panels, right, Tom?
Sure.
And we talk, every time it's like different circumstances. But
we're all broke and we hate everybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Chris had a car.
Yeah, Chris got a car. So
I figured out how to do it. It was like I don't think you can do it anymore because they don't a friend of mine was trying to get an affiliates campaign or affiliates account set up, and it was like we don't give those to personal bloggers anymore. And I was like, well, it's because I bought a car. I made payments on a car for 3 years.
So you're to blame. Okay, well, I know we have some questions, so I want to start taking some questions. Yes. You've been patient, thank you.
I was just wondering because nowadays, since you can get the information anywhere, like say something breaks, this book is coming out, the press release is boom, sent to everyone immediately. Do you resent? Do you resent the fact that now we kind of want infotainment? We want the press release, but we also want you to entertain us with your interpretation of the press release? Does it bother you that it's like, not only do I have to be a journalist, but now I have to be an entertainer as well?
It doesn't bother me. Well, because again, the super common answer, I don't really consider myself a journalist, but what I do is not journalism in the strict definition. I do not I'm not. What's written down in this notebook is the list of atomic robo trades I needed because I had some holes in my bookshelf. I'm not chasing down leads. I just have opinions about things. So I don't mind that at all. That's perfect for me. And I don't mind it as a reader either, because what I gravitate to as a reader, and this is gonna sound, Tom and Heidi, I'm sorry. I never read comics news at all. I mean, when I was a kid, I read Wizard, which is like comics exist. The depth of news you get from Wizard. But even when I was running the store, I just did I didn't, because they're gonna come out. I'm gonna read them. I don't. But the stuff that I would gravitate to, And the stuff that I would gravitate to, like when the sort of group of comics bloggers that I came up with sort of came up, were people who were analyzing things or shining a spotlight on things in an informing and entertaining way, which is what I've tried to do. I get a lot of people talking about Ask Chris and how I try to present information in a way that's accessible for people. And the reason I do that is because A, word count, and B, because that's the kind of thing I like to do. Like, I might not know about this particular thing, but if it's interesting, as a reader, as a writer, I know all there is to know about it. But like as a reader, like I don't know about I didn't know about Stetson Kennedy and the Superman radio show and the Clan of the Fiery Cross. That's a really interesting story. But if you don't know about the Superman radio show and how the Superman radio show influenced stuff that came out, all that stuff needs to be explained. And maybe I don't want to go listen to 40 hours of a radio show from 1942. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to read a column about it, or listen to This American Life, which is how I first heard that story. This American Life is a good model, I think, for what I do, because it presents information that's also literary. That site that I wrote for when I was 17, like they classified themselves as literary journalism, which is it's a highfalutin way of saying like jokes, which is what it was. Like the reason I got that job was because like guys from Mystery Science Theater were writing there, and I was in the Bang Club, so I knew about the site, and I just blind submitted stuff because I didn't know how things work. So no, I don't resent it at all, because that's kind of the connection I want to make, and that helps you. You find common ground with someone that you're reading, and then you get to interpret, like, okay, do I care about this person's opinion or not? Like, is this person right about this person? If I agree with Tom about this, am I going to agree with him about this? If I agree with Heidi about this, am I going to agree with her about this? Like, you get to form like an influence map of who are the people that you're reading, so you know how seriously you need to take them about things. Like, obviously, I'm 100% correct every time I write something. But, some people have different opinions that, and it's fine if they don't listen to me about that.
I don't think I'm entitled to have things work out the way I want them. That would be my short answer. So if people want to process information a different way than I want to give it to them, that's tough. That's tough on me. I either have to conform or I lose readers, kind of. It's kind of, I'm not entitled to traffic because I do things a certain way, if that makes sense. So if entertainment is what they need, I either provide the entertainment or I get your hits. And I guess the only thing that keeps me, interested in that is I'm constantly interested in the way, like the different ways people process stuff and the length of articles and I'm interested in that, so I like playing around with it. But for the most part, I would probably just take my ball and go home in terms of not that I'm never, I'm sometimes entertaining, but I just don't think things are supposed to work out for me. Maybe that's
Well, you mentioned the idea of adversarial relationships, and whether, like, it's weird, because I've always considered myself to have a really adversarial relationship with my audience, which is weird, because I come, it's the exact opposite, because when I come here, people are very nice, but, like, the internet kind of amplifies that adversarial thing, so, like, I have a mission where, sit down, I'm going to tell you why this is important, you're going to listen, like, I don't like forums, I don't like anything because, and it's a very egotistical thing, and I'll cop to that any day of the week. When I'm writing, I'm not there to have a conversation. like legit, and I know, okay, I know. But when I'm writing, I'm not there. It's not a two-way street. It is a one-way method of communication. Like I shut the comments down on my side. Now, if you want to have a conversation about it, you can find me on Twitter. The barrier is finding me on Twitter or sending me an email. If you send me an email, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to respond and we can have a conversation. If you at me on Twitter and you're not going to send me 20 tweets about how DC was first, and they're the best, and Man of Steel is easy to relate to. I'm just going to go, okay, and that's it. Like, that's all you're going to get.
You know, I mean, and I'm not saying this to pick on Chris, but
Go for it.
well, you know, I felt like there was one, like there's a story we all covered, although Tom covered it. We all covered it in ways that totally reflect our personality, as you can see on this panel. But which was when, you know, San Diego had the whatchamado, the
Harassment policy?
well, what do you call it when you fill out the? I'm so brain dead. You know, the petition to have their harassment policy, and which is a really worthwhile thing and definitely should happen. And you know, but I think a lot of people covered it in a way, and you know, you wrote a very scathing piece that was like.
Andy cut out all the mean parts.
Really? Well, but I thought what was left was still pretty strong.
Oh, it was.
It was very strong. And I mean, this is also just what keeps me going, is that, you know, when I Google something that I want to find out, so many times it's, you know, something I wrote 10 years ago, and it's very discouraging that I'm the only person who cares about this. But I mean, it's really hard to find articles that are on comics news sites that are really fact-driven, and for various reasons. And, you know, I felt this is a very complicated issue. And also, I mean, if you read what I cover Comic-Con every year, and, you know, does is Tom. Tom has an amazing, you know, resource guide about Comic-Con. I mean, I've been going for 30 years. And so, you know, I know quite a bit about it. But, I mean, I knew that they take, you know, I know they take safety seriously. And I felt like in Chris's piece that you were, you know, like, it was your opinion, but I mean, it was kind of, if you came away from it, you thought that the people who run San Diego don't give a shit about safety, where they do. But they have, you know, they need to change their thinking. But it wasn't about that. So, I don't know. Anyway, you know, I think that what you're doing, you're right. I mean, you're not telling me to be a journalist. You're being more of a pundit.
Yeah. Which again, like, and if I say that, like, that is a total cop-out. Like, it is. But it's true. It's also true. Like, that's how I make that money. That's why they hired me.
Yeah. I guess the difference, I don't think it's different now. I don't care to win arguments on the internet as much as I did. And I feel like that way with a lot of news articles. When there's an editorial with which I disagree, you know, I don't go after it the same way. Who gives a shit if you win the argument on the internet? I want to address the issue. And sometimes I think we all, I don't know, as a group, as a collective, that we concentrate on scoring points and getting high fives from our internet buddies, and getting likes. And does the issue change? You know, really? Because you did this? I don't know. You know, does it, or did we all feel good because we ended up on the right side of the issue and got heads up? I don't know.
This isn't a popularity contest, or is it?
Well, I hope to God it's not.
We are coming up on an hour, so I want to see if we can work in any more questions. Do we have any? Yes.
Chris, you touched on this just briefly, but how do you respond to feedback, especially when like 99% of comments are the worst? So reader feedback.
I mean, that's like. What I always say is that if your name's not Andy Corey, you're not signing the check, then your opinion matters less than the person who is. But that's a very fluent way to sign it. But like, no, like I got an actually the other day. Actually, I got one live at the con when a dude just walked by the table and said, "You were wrong," which I don't think is the way to do things. I got an actually an email that I didn't mind at all because it was about Batman. It was from Mike W. Barr, who used to write Detective Comics, and that guy knows. Like that guy, like if that dude wants to correct me, fine. And it's not like, and I've met so many people who read my stuff and have, you know, even when they disagree with me, they can you can disagree with someone in a perfectly fine way. I argue with Chad all the time. It's all we do, and we're best friends, you know. Chad's my co-writer on Down to Fight and also. It's the you forgots and the unactuallys and the why didn't you talk about this when I did. And the people who read the first sentence of the article and skip down to the end and talk about it,
Which is 90%.
Which is the overwhelming majority. That's why I stopped. Because I'm not a hard dude to find. Like, if you want to talk to me, again, I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm on, my email has been on my site since I started the site. Like, if you're willing to, like, look around for a second, then you probably have a thought that is going to be slightly better to deal with. So it's like I just don't read the comments, because I feel like the comments section encourages discussion in a way that nullifies it. And that's not even like a comics problem. That's like an internet problem. Can I go on tangent real quick?
Sure, real quick.
I went to YouTube to look at the video. I went to get the video for "It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday" because the Shield broke up on Monday Night Raw. This is very important to me. And I like, the video was small. Like, it won't keep the large player, so I got to see the first two comments, and they were two people talking about whether it's necessary and whether it's okay to try to forget about someone who has died, or if you should keep that person's memory alive in your heart and remember them, and then use that memory to honor them, or if the emotions are so painful that you just do need to forget them. And one guy was like, "Ex-Joker, X-Man, X." And I was like, where's this YouTube been? Where are these commenters? But no, other than that, below that was just all Rachel's.
But I have to say, I still have comments, and again, Tom and I have gone. Tom does not have comments, and it's a slippery slope, and it takes a lot of time to clean out your comments, and maybe it's because my traffic is so low that I don't get so many trolls. But I had Brandon Montclair of Rocket Girl. He posted this comment on one of my stories where he really talked about the economics of Image Comics, and people picked that up and ran it as a story, and then they interviewed him more about it, and it was very valuable information. And there's another thread that's just recent about conventions where people have been posting very, I think, valuable, people in the industry, or fans who are intelligent, and so, that is, I am old fogey, I come from a world where you were the gatekeeper, not a popularity contest of likes and shares, and so I'll never really be about, I'll never be completely comfortable in the world of social media. And you know what, that's okay. And then I'll phase myself out into the sunset to the rocking chair. So comment threads are kind of a 90s thing, and I liked the 90s. I thought they were awesome. They were awesome for everything but comics, so I'm sticking with it.
Also, I got a real quick turnaround on Comic Alliance. One long one and two short ones. I write the long one at night. I wake up in the morning and I write the short ones. And I go to the gym, I eat dinner, whatever. And part of it is necessity. When I was really reading and responding to comments on the ISB, it was when I had my job, where I would go to my job and just sit in my office and goof around for an hour. That's when I could have, I had the time to respond to people, whether positively or negatively. I don't. I'm done. I'm moving on. By the time you read it, I'm gone. I have made my feelings clear.
Yes, you have. Males. Well, I'm going to ask one last question, and we'll wrap up.
Right.
We're a little over an hour now. What of your pieces you've written, of the coverage you've created, what are you proudest of? What do you feel has moved the needle, or what is most memorable to you?
I take a lot of pride in my obits when I write an obit. I don't write obits. I've been screwed up on the obits. But when I can do a long, good obit, I really like those. I think that there's not comics that can be dishonorable and awful sometimes, and sometimes all you have to give someone is the respect of recognizing their lives and their achievements, and not simply post, I met the dude at San Diego Comic-Con, he complimented my dress, I liked him. You know, it's like,
That's what I do, so, you know.
It's like I don't think that I'm more, you know, I just like that about the culture, so I hopefully, in the best of bits, I give us a sense of the lives of the people that were important. And,
I should add, you did a terrific job with Kim Thompson.
Yeah, it was about a year ago. I wrote Kim Thompson's a friend of mine, and was able to write a really long piece. And yeah, so that's a great thing. It's an honor to get to do that. But I guess that counts.
Yeah, right.
Well, I actually found this guy who was doing Facebook demographics. So this wasn't actually something I wrote, something someone else wrote, but I gave it a platform where he had been doing this for his own site with Facebook demographics studies, and he was showing that the comics market was way more diverse than people thought it was. And it was actually 45% of the 20 million people on Facebook who like comics or comics-related terms were female. So, which is the most startling demographic information that had been released in a long time. So I was able to, because my site had a little bit more oomph than his did, when I put it up there, it got a lot more traction. And now I'm so happy because I'll see in Forbes or, Slate or everywhere when they talk about this, they link to his information. And now it's kind of entered the vernacular. So, that kind of thing, that I feel really did move the needle in a way, and I think really, getting that kind of information out there is what I'm personally, happiest about, especially when it's forward thinking, when it's moving. I love comics, and we all do. I just want to see them get better.
Absolutely. I make the mistake of giving Chris the last word.
Yeah, lots of luck with this one. Everything I read is brilliant. Every piece is an individual diamond. No, I guess it's kind of got to be the one about the piece I read about the casual racism of killing off all your minority characters and replacing them with their white predecessors, and how that's a problem. Because I know that made people really mad, and I know that made other people really happy to see that. I ran into Dwayne McDuffie at San Diego that year, and I he was walking past me, and I was talking to him, hey, thanks for I know that you left a comment. You were really supportive of that article, and he was like, oh, thanks. He also said only Nixon can go to China, which is, I feel like it might have been a slightly backhanded compliment. But he mentioned that he liked seeing people talking about it. And again, I know that made people mad, but it's kind of what I do, which is reading a lot of comics and looking for patterns in the storytelling. That's kind of the most important one that I've done. I also really like the one about Scooby-Doo and secular humanism. That was really that one. I had a good time writing that on Thanksgiving one year.
Well, I would just like to say thanks to all of you, and I will selfishly say to keep on doing what you're doing, don't stop. We all need it. So thanks so much.
That's it for episode 32 of Dave Talks Comics. Comments or questions can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com or tweet them to @DaveTalksComics. You can also leave your comments or questions in whichever forum you find this posted. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be getting back to more regular fare. I will be talking about the early 2000s miniseries, Kitty Pryde miniseries Mechanics, and then I will be beginning what I hope to be an ongoing feature that I'm calling Who's Oh Hot Moo, in which I will be going through the Who's Who, the original editions of Who's Who, the DC guide to the DC Universe, something like that, and the official handbook to the Marvel Universe, and commenting on what I find and rereading it in total and as I said, commenting on what I say. Thank you for listening.